What's up, everybody? Welcome into DodgerHeads, presented by DodgerBlue.com, part of the Medium Large Sports Network. My name is Jeff Spiegel, joined today by Andy McCullough of The Athletic, also author of The Last of His Kind, a book about Clayton Kershaw. Andy, thanks for hopping in with us as we approach the All-Star break.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for having me.
We're recording this in the midst of the longest losing streak the Dodgers have had in a number of years. And the real question here, Andy, is this team terrible? Are the Dodgers terrible? Should they pack it up and go home?
Yeah, no, they suck, clearly. I was the beat writer in 17 and that's the best team I've ever seen, the 17 team. And they should have won like 115 games, but at some point in September, they went like legit like 1-18 or something like that. Do you remember that? And I remember I was talking to Dave Roberts and they were lost like 8 in a row. And I was like, what is going on here? He's like, I've never seen anything like this. And I used to work for the Padres. So yeah, I don't know. They should be fine. I wouldn't harbor long-term worries about the Dodgers right now, but they have some, it would do well for them to play better. And they're despite all of the spending and Andrew Friedman's insistence that they wouldn't be aggressive at the trade deadline. They're going to be aggressive at the trade deadline. They'll be looking to add.
On that note, I mean, obviously you're plugged in. You're a national guy covering baseball for The Athletic. When you say you think the Dodgers are going to be aggressive, what areas do you think they're going to prioritize?
I think bullpen is an obvious, fit. I think that despite all the sort of guys, who they've spent on, you can always use more arms. And so there's going to be a fair amount of interesting relief types available, sort of difference making relief types. Available is a strong word, but the Twins are out of it, right? The Guardians are probably out of it. And so someone like Griffin Jacks or Duran with the Twins or Emmanuel Clase with the Guardians, I'm not saying that they'd be able to get those players, but those are the type of players who tend to pique the interest of teams like the Dodgers. They also, tend to pique the interest of the teams like the Padres. And somehow the Dodgers and the Padres just always seem to end up in the market for, the same sort of players. And so we'll see how that all shakes out.
Yeah, the Dodgers bullpen's been a weird one because they obviously spend the money. They go out and sign Tanner Scott, who for, I would say, like 85% of the year has been very good, but the other 15% has been bad. He's already allowed like twice as many home runs this season as he did all of last year. They go out and sign Kirby Yates, which felt like this luxury item that, of course, the Dodgers did this. They're paying 100% tax, yada, yada, yada. He hasn't been that good. We know Andrew Friedman doesn't like to spend on relief pitchers. He kind of goes out and spends on relief pitchers, and maybe this is why he doesn't like to.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, yes. This is why, is because you have Tanner Scott, who, like you said, the peripherals seem perfectly fine. The strikeout rate's good, the walk rate's good, but he gives up home runs all of a sudden, and like if you give up a handful of home runs as a reliever, which is a thing that can happen, all of a sudden your year looks not that great, and then you're thinking about, you have 3 more seasons with this guy. What happens as the stuff, starts to degrade and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, like there's a reason they've stayed out of that market in the past, with the exception really of Kenley Jansen, but they can afford it. So, it's their world. We're just living in it.
What about a position player side? I know the reports are that Max Muncy only has a bone bruise. I think any Dodgers fan who heard the Michael Kopech injury update and then saw him be placed on the 60-day IL is right to be skeptical. Muncy is weirdly like the most important guy in this lineup. When he leaves, the offense sucks. So do you think, do you have any sense of how concerned they are about Muncy and whether or not the offensive side of things might be an area to attack?
I mean, I don't. I think that's one where they feel like they probably have enough. They might work the margins of it, but I think they probably have enough if Muncy is able to make it back. It's another terrible day for Nolan Arenado. He continues to not get to experience his dream of being the Dodgers' third baseman. But yeah, I mean, I think I think all fans are skeptical, right, of when they're told like, oh, this guy will be back, because they can all come up with for me, like from a national perspective, I would say the Dodgers are not known as a team where it's like a guy has he's totally fine, and then the player turns out to be like his career's over. I think that's just a common occurrence in the sport at this point. So yeah, I mean, I think a lot does hinge though on Muncy's health, and the point you're making, because he's a really good hitter.
Yeah.
And he's a different sort of hitter than they have, and he provides an element of, sort of patience, and there's just a sort of sneak. It's not sneaky, but it's just like sort of, it's like a lot like jolting power. You're like, whoa, we just hit the crap out of that baseball. And so, yeah, they could use him healthy. That would make them a lot better.
On the starting pitching side, we know the names that, if healthy, and what the Dodgers could throw at some people. We're going to talk Clayton Kershaw here in a minute because, again, you wrote a great book about him. But there's a world where Blake Snell, Tyler Glasnow, Shohei Ohtani, Yoshinobu Yamamoto are all healthy. And right now, today, this is like every Dodgers fan's worst nightmare. But right now, they all are trending seemingly in the right direction. Tyler Glasnow made his first appearance. They do have some depth behind those guys. They've got Clayton Kershaw. They've got Emmett Sheehan, Dustin May, who's a pretty polarizing guy in Dodgers land right now as far as what his upside is. But do you think the Dodgers would they be foolish to bet on the health of the list of guys that I just named and saying, no, we're just going to ride this out. We're not going to add starting pitching.
Yeah.
And we're just going to bank on 3.5 of these guys being effective and healthy come October.
I guess what I would, to counter that, is like, who is this pitcher they should go out and get who is definitively, well, you're not going to find someone definitively better if all those guys are right. But who is the one who is good enough to start a postseason game, and like is not an injury risk? Like, is that I'm I mean, Sandy Alcantara has been terrible, right? Like, Zach Gallen has not been particularly good. Like, who is the starting pitcher on the market? Who is the Jack Flaherty of this year's market? I don't know if there is. Maybe I'm missing someone.
I mean, Chris Sale's kind of the one name that, like, if he's healthy, the Braves are terrible.
Definitely. If you're talking about, sort of reliability and availability, no one is more likely to post 32 times in a year than Chris Sale. I mean, no, it's the same thing. Like, it's just, yeah, sure. If you can get Chris Sale and he's healthy and he's Chris Sale, holy crap, what a great trade. But like, that's not going to be an easy trade to make. The Braves aren't just looking to give him away. So yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to be like argumentative per se. I just think that if you're the Dodgers and you have these guys in hand, the upside for all of them is really high. You have a little bit of depth, as you said. I think, unless there's an obvious sort of guy who falls into your lap, I don't know if they're in the need of a Flaherty-like stabilizer for this group.
Yeah. I'm with you completely. And I think it's a funny position for the Dodgers to be in because, again, the trend on all of the names I just mentioned, as far as health goes, is in the right direction. Tyler Glasnow just returned. Blake Snell is progressing in his rehab. Ohtani is in the midst of the slowest starting pitcher buildup in the history of baseball, I believe. And so it's not like these guys are doubtful to be back by October. What's interesting is Blake Snell going to be back before the trade deadline? Are you going to have a real sense of what Tyler Glasnow can give you before the trade deadline? That's kind of the more interesting question to me.
Right. I guess I'm looking now at the Athletics big board, and one name that is fairly that actually would fit that is Seth Lugo, I guess. So, but if the Royals are willing to move Lugo, which it's not totally clear if they want to give up on the wild card chase, I suspect the Cubs and maybe the Padres will. What, man? How is it possible? Dodgers and Padres going after the same guy. They would probably be more inclined and more willing to. Like, the Cubs are in a position where it's like they need to do something big.
Yeah.
Right. Like they're over leveraged on the importance of this season. The Dodgers are not, despite how it might be frustrating to fans to be told that the Dodgers are not in a like win the World Series or this whole thing was a waste of time sort of situation, right? Like, they have Ohtani will be back next year, right? Yeah. Like they'll still be pretty good. So anyway, I don't know. I mean, Lugo would be a fit, but yeah, I mean he's been really good. But even then, it's like if Snell's healthy, if Yamamoto's healthy, if Glasnow's healthy, if Ohtani's healthy, like if Kershaw's healthy, like is Lugo, where does he fit in that mix? Right. He's in there, but it's like not really obvious in terms of postseason upside. And they don't really need him to win the division. Yeah.
And it feels like my thing has been, they have guys in that next tier of Sheehan, May, Robleski, like Landon Knack. They have guys that if the goal is just, hey, we need some Lance Lynn inning eaters here to just like carry us over the finish line. it's not like they don't have those guys either. They have a sort of a roster of 10 or 12 deep. I'm not saying none of those guys are as good as Seth Lugo has been so far this year. But
yeah, I'm not trying to slight Lugo. He's awesome. But it's more like, would you rather have him start a postseason game than a healthy Blake Snell?
Yeah, no chance.
Right. Probably. I mean, it's close. Lugo's really good, but healthy Blake Snell is healthy Blake Snell. You do run the risk though of Snell not being available, but like, guess what? That's what happens when you sign Blake Snell and Tyler Glasnow. You run the risk they're not going to be available at certain times during the year.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the guy you mentioned is Clayton Kershaw, and people laughed at me, called me a homer, told me I need to give up on the dream when I said Clayton Kershaw was going to be throwing meaningful innings for this team. The joke on this show is a buddy of mine would always say, something has gone terribly wrong if Clayton Kershaw is starting a playoff game for the Dodgers. And my response has always been, Andy, or something has gone terribly right for Clayton Kershaw to be starting a postseason game for the Dodgers. His last 9 starts, he has an ERA that starts with a 2. We are back to the normal Clayton Kershaw experience here. And honestly, aside from that 3,000 strikeout game, which I'm going to ask you about, like the other 5 starts in the last month have been 2 earned runs or fewer. So what have you seen from a guy that you've obviously followed very closely, and despite throwing 86-mile-an-hour fastballs is still finding a way to make this happen?
Yeah, I mean, I mean this. I am not being hyperbolic when I say this. He is the best pitcher who has ever lived in terms of run prevention.
Yeah.
You can look it up. He has, I mean, I think DeGrom may have passed him relatively recently, but he has the lowest ERA and the best ERA plus. Like if you need someone to go out there and not give up a run, Clayton Kershaw is the best bet who's ever lived. And so he still has, the funkiness in his delivery. He still has the conviction of when he's trying to make pitches. He still has, sort of an intimidation factor. I think, I made this joke on our show at the roundtable, a couple of weeks ago, but it's like, I believe that in 10 years, you could drop him on the mound at Busch Stadium on a Saturday afternoon and he could give you 5 scoreless innings. Like no matter, it does, like he could be throwing 75 and he could get through 5 innings against the Cardinals, right? Like there are certain, if you don't see him very often and if you're not accustomed to that delivery and you're not like super locked in on what he's going to be trying to do, he will just he cares more. It's just the thing that's always separated him is he cares more about this at bat than you do, and he's going to out execute you. Now, when you get into the postseason, when teams are more geared up, or when he's facing a club like the Padres or the Diamondbacks who have seen him more often and feel more comfortable against him, the lack of stuff becomes more noticeable, I would say. The Giants, for some reason, are completely unable to use this advantage. He will never give up a run to the Giants ever again. So, I think when I watch him, I think he's been better than I expected, to be honest, especially keeping track. And I'm not following every pitch, just candidly. I wrote very often about him when I was covering the team for the LA Times, and I wrote very often about him earlier in my career at the Athletic, and I worked for a couple years on this book. And it's kind of like I'm just kind of leaving that man be, mostly. I try not to, I don't bother him or text him or things like that, so I'm not super privy to his interior sort of thoughts in the way that maybe I would have been for earlier portions of his career. But my sense of it is that he's trying his best to enjoy this, and he's really just kind of laying it all out. I mean, every outing, they don't look easy. He'll probably never have another easy outing again, but it's like I said, he in general, he cares more than the guy he's facing, and that makes a huge difference.
Yeah. I liked how you said he's enjoying it, because that was one of the things when he does get to 3,000 strikeouts post game. There were a lot of these little sort of anecdotes about how during his, as we know, famous meticulous pregame routine, he kind of took moments to acknowledge the fans, and he did some things that were sort of out of character. And I would even add, the celebration felt like the most anti-Kershaw thing of all time. A guy who does not want to be disrupted, does not like being the center of attention, does not need sort of recognition, and yet he sort of embraced that moment and everything. And again, I know you're not following this team day to day. You're not talking to him, but as somebody who seemingly knows him as well as you do, did you notice, did that feel kind of like an out of character day for Clayton Kershaw?
Well, I think you've been starting to see it, in pieces since 2020. I think that it's become, he like, it sounds really cliche, but he was so different before they won. He was more guarded. He was, I think, less willing to acknowledge success and less willing to accept it. And, despite everything he said about, and he started to admit this, in recent years, that how much the postseason really did get to him and how much, he really felt the weight of responsibility for not winning. And once they won in 2020, you started to see it slowly start to fade away. So like little things like at the All-Star game in 2022, when he was the starter, right? Like he kind of took a little moment to like look up at the stadium and take it all in, which is something he said he had never done before in his entire. He'd never, all the times he pitched at Dodger Stadium, he never looked up and like just taken a gaze around the stadium. And I think he's gotten further into that sort of mode this year. I don't know if it's his last season. I suspect it will be, but who can say? I think he's trying his best. What he wanted to come back for this year, and then we wrote about this a little bit, in the epilogue and for the paperback, is just he wanted just like one more shot, just one more chance to go out there and pitch well for a season, to help the team win, to, if he was good enough to get a chance to start again in October and, and just be part of it one more time. And I think, you can see that he's trying to enjoy it, and it's a welcome change for Dodgers fans. And you can just see how much he means to the fans. You could see it at the parade or after the parade at Dodger Stadium, when he got like one of the biggest pops of anyone, and he didn't really play a role, in the World Series in any of the postseason. And you saw it in just how the fans were so locked in for the 3,000 strikeout game and so just amped up and wanted him so badly to get it. So it was, it was a really cool moment. It was really, sort of riveting theater from my perspective, just like watching on my couch in New York,
Yeah. Yeah. I tell people this about Clayton Kershaw all the time, and I don't speak for all Dodger fans. I speak for me. By the time 2020 came around, I found myself rooting more for Clayton Kershaw than I did for the Dodgers. Mm-hmm. And I know obviously those two things were the same because he was still a member of the Dodgers. Sure. But for me, it was more about needing my guy, Clayton Kershaw, who had been so incredible. And, I could tell you all the reasons why I felt like he had been treated unfairly for postseasons. And you wrote many of those articles sort of defending some of those moments. But it is like, I think his identification with an entire generation of Dodgers fans and what we've been through with him, the high points and the incredible low points. I think you're right. Like, I do think there's a fan affinity for Clayton Kershaw that I can't imagine being replicated, just given the longevity, given how good he's been, and given the fact that he has only ever been a Dodger. It's a unique thing that he's gotten to experience.
For sure. I mean, and it's you can see, like, it's not like he's the only person who gets cheered at the ballpark, right? They go crazy for Ohtani, they go crazy for Freeman, they go crazy for Kike, there's guys who really have a relationship with the fan base, but there isn't that sort of emotional, pull of he's like, if you care about the Dodgers and you care about, like the history of the franchise and you've been watching it, if you get to our age, or you're, you're in your 30s or 40s or 50s or whatever, and you've been caring about this for a while, like you remember the moments of seeing him in pain, on the mound and seeing, I mean, I don't know. We're not really talking about this, but I feel like I've never felt a ballpark like viscerally recoil than I did as in the second home run in 2019 of the NLDS, when Soto went deep and hit that ball into the right field bleachers. I have just never been in a ballpark like that, where it was like the stadium like collapsed in on itself, essentially, and I think part of it was because who was on the mound, if that's Joe Kelly doing that in the ninth inning, like I think fans would have been upset, but it wouldn't have felt as devastating. Right. Yeah. And so to see the guy who gave up that home run took responsibility for it, never shirked responsibility for it. To see him be able to triumph, a year later, to see him kind of work through all this physical stuff and get to this point where he really is giving himself a chance to go out on top, I think it means a lot to people, clearly.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned, not inside information, but sort of if you had to guess that this might be Kershaw's last season, it feels like the fact that he has been successful, he's been able to prove to himself and to everybody else that he was not washed and cooked as many people have written him off to be. But also, this 3,000 strikeout thing had to have meant something. It's not, there's 20 guys in history that have ever done it. We've talked a lot on this show. I don't think anybody else is ever going to get to it. That's my view. We have people that disagree with me on that. But you mentioned watching it from your couch, like he had to grind through it. Nothing is easy with this guy. You could tell the moment he felt the moment of the pressure, and it played out in sort of a poor performance overall for him. But the whole theater of it, Dave Roberts leaving him in, him getting the last strikeout in the 5th inning, Roberts letting him get the 6th, and then striking out to end the inning. It was kind of, in many ways to me, and I'm curious to get your thoughts, like a perfect way for this to happen for Clayton Kershaw based on who he is.
Yeah, no one looked happier than Dave when he got to 3,000.
Totally.
Those two, they're quite the pair. Yeah, I mean, I think it was a really special moment, for the people in the ballpark, but also, for Kershaw and for his family, for his kids, his kids, the two oldest, Callie and Charlie, are at the point where they can like actually remember this stuff, it seems like. And that's been kind of a big motivator for him to keep going, is that they're at a stage where like they can actually really experience it and enjoy it, and not just sort of be like, kind of passive bystanders for his career. So yeah, and like the fact that they came back and won, also made it easier for everyone to enjoy. Yeah, it was just a really, like I said, it was a really special night. I think that it was set up to be a sort of celebration of him.
Yeah.
And in a way it ended up, somehow being more than that. And, it's kind of a lucky coincidence of, things. But it's one of the most memorable moments of the season, across the sport, I would say.
Yeah. Do you think anybody else gets to 3,000, or you think he's the last?
I do think he's the last of his kind. Paperback still available. I do think someone will get to 3,000. I do think so. It's going to be a while though.
Do you think it's going to be like a Paul Skeene, like somebody who's like 20, 25 and under right now?
I think I mean, that's probably the most likely, because if you had asked me 2 years ago, I would have said pretty confidently that Garrett Cole is going to get there.
Yeah.
And then, Cole missed a significant chunk of last year with an elbow problem, and he's out all of this year with Tommy John. Who knows what it'll look like when he comes back, midway through 2026. So I think the next closest active person who has a chance is Chris Sale, but he's like, almost 500 away, somewhere 450 to 500. That's just a lot, and even with as good as Sale was last year and this year, it's just that's a lot of strikeouts for a guy who has just dealt with a lot of physical issues. But I do think that someone will get to 3,000 again. I think that it is going to take, though. It's like supposed to be hard, like only 20 guys have done it. Like I think that because Scherzer, Verlander, Kershaw, and I think Sabathia is in there too, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I
Kershaw
think
talked about him being one of the guys that he kind of looked up to.
Well, I think because those 4 guys have done it in relatively recent succession, it's a milestone that feels like, pretty attainable or whatever. Yeah. It's like, just be really good for a long time. We live in a strikeout era, but it's like, okay, 20 guys have done it. Yeah. Like, there's been a lot of guys who play baseball over the last, 150 years. So I do think that someone will get there. I think, it could be a Skeens type, that young man from the Brewers. What was in his cornflakes the other day? Seriously. He was throwing that fastball. So I do, like, guys will come along to do it again. It's hard to pinpoint who it's going to be. And I think that is kind of what the last like 4 or 5 years with injuries to various candidates have shown. So I think someone will get there, but I have no idea who it'll be. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, that's Andy McCullough. His book is The Last of His Kind. It's awesome. And I don't just say that because Andy's on here. It's genuinely the best baseball book I've ever read. Now I'm biased because it's about Clayton Kershaw, but I love this book because it gives you insight into a guy that I don't think a lot of Dodgers fans necessarily have a ton of insight into, other than him being in our lives for as long as he has been. So, and the newer version, there's an updated one, right? With an epilogue.
Yeah, there's paperback out now that has an epilogue that kind of deals with the 2024 season, and mostly about Kershaw in 2024, but also some stuff on just Dodgers won the World Series. That was fun. So some stuff about Walker Buehler, and kind of his relationship with Kershaw and things like that. So yeah, there's some new info in there.
That's the starter we didn't talk about, Andy. Is he the reliever that we didn't talk about? Which one is Walker Buehler going to be when he comes back to LA?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not totally sure that's going to be the difference maker. I don't know. That's been a bummer to watch. He really, that is a guy who has given all of himself, I would say, to the sport. And you'd like to see that sort of effort rewarded, I guess.
Yeah, well, he did have the final out of the 2024 World Series, so he's got that in his back pocket at least. That is Andy McCullough of The Athletic. You can check him out there. You can check him out on social media, and again, check out his book, The Last of His Kind: Clayton Kershaw and the Burden of Greatness. Andy, thank you for your time. Thank you to everybody who's watching. We appreciate you joining us. Go ahead, subscribe, ring the notification bell. We greatly appreciate it. Tons of content coming up. So thanks for joining, everyone. As always, go Dodgers.